The Laura Ingraham Show.
In our constitutional republic is restored. And yet, as the day went on, it just seemed to become, in many cases, just a farce, either from the Democrat side or even in some cases from the Republican side. And we were asked about this last night on Special Report, and there was a moment where we were talking about all this, and Mara Eliason said, well, maybe people are thinking maybe he could be someone like a Souter, Gorsuch. And I said, he better not be. Better not be after all these assurances we're getting.
My brother Scott asked if you've ever worn gym shorts and a tank top under your robe. Senator, on that one, we have what's called the Fifth Amendment, which is part of the Bill of Rights as well, and which, of course, protects the right not to self-incriminate. So I might have to exercise my rights under the Fifth Amendment to that one.
That is a good answer.
From Hollywood, almost live, it's The Gong Show.
Oh, my goodness. Chuck Barris, Gong Show host, creator of the Newlywed Game, the dating game. A lot of people think he was the ultimate creator of reality TV. And the beginning of the sexualization of the culture, well, perhaps. But he's dead at age 87. And I don't know, all these news stories seem to converge. The Gong Show. When do you hit the gong? The gong meaning not working. The performance isn't working. The performance of Al Franken, who tries to outdo Gorsuch in his questioning. Yesterday, I decided that I can do a pretty good Al Franken impersonation. You know, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been here for like 8 years, and I think a lot of this stuff is just really common sense, Judge Gorsuch.
Look, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been on this committee, and I've paid some attention. So I know that what you're talking about here is the plain meaning rule. Here's what the rule means. When the plain meaning of a statute is clear on its face, when its meaning is obvious, courts have no business looking beyond the meaning to the statute's purpose. And that's what you used, right?
That's what was argued to us by both sides, Senator.
But that's what you used.
Yep. Both sides
right.
argued that the plain meaning supported their
and you used it to come to your conclusion.
He's trying to match wits with a sitting circuit court judge on constitutional law, thinking he has him on this point of plain meaning, the plain meaning rule, when in the case that Franken was talking about, actually both sides made the point about the plain meaning rule, so the point he was raising really didn't make any sense.
But both sides.
But the plain meaning rule has an exception. When using the plain meaning rule would create an absurd result, courts should depart from the plain meaning. It is absurd to say this company is in its rights to fire him because he made the choice of possibly dying from freezing to death or causing other people to die, possibly by driving an unsafe vehicle. That's absurd.
Al Franken doesn't understand the role of judges. He actually thinks the role of judges in the appellate court is to be the primary trier of facts or to make up new law that doesn't apply to a particular case. But this is why these hearings end up being a total farce. Gorsuch is sitting there for 11 hours. The Democrats, well, they think that they are going to score political points in a hearing that's supposed to be about the role of the judiciary. And time again, they not only didn't score political points, they just look like absolute idiots. The 5 dumbest questions put to Gorsuch is a piece written on LifeZette. And I don't know how the LifeZette writers came to only find 5 of these questions. Dick Durbin. Well, he employed the classic guilt by association tactic. We have. Dick Durbin employed a classic guilt by association tactic by confronting Gorsuch with controversial statements made by people he worked with over the years. Question: do you feel that what Professor Finnis wrote about purity of culture and such is something that we should condemn or congratulate? What? Gorsuch said he would want to read the entire writing and not just hear excerpts, before passing judgment. You're listening to your Healthy Radio Addiction, 855-40-LAURA. Judge Gorsuch was asked, of course, about Roe versus Wade and whether Donald Trump's litmus test that he recounted, and he frankly shouldn't have stated it the way he did during the campaign, but he was asked about this. This is how it went.
You are not an unfit person. I don't think there's any reason to suggest that you're his favorite. Had you ever met President Trump personally?
Not until my interview.
In that interview, did he ever ask you to overrule Roe v. Wade?
No, Senator.
What would he have done if he'd asked?
Senator, I would have walked out the door. It's not what judges do. Okay. They don't do it at that end of Pennsylvania Avenue, and they shouldn't do it at this end either.
Well, that was planned. That was a planned answer and question by Lindsey Graham, and it was a little dramatic answer by Gorsuch. I don't think he had to go that far at all. I just don't think it. By the way, the big story today is, of course, whether Donald Trump is going to be able to get this health care reform bill, which is supposed to be repealed and replaced, passed. Tomorrow's the big vote in the House. My sources on Capitol Hill tell me they do not have the votes. He went up on Capitol Hill yesterday, tried to twist some arms, but it's unlikely at this moment that they have the votes to pass this. A lot of legwork needed to be done ahead of time for this legislation, and it was not done, frankly. We're going to talk to Jim Jordan coming up from Ohio's 4th Congressional District, and we'll see what he has to say about the vote tally as it is now. Scott Drew is going to join us later on, Baylor University's men's basketball head coach. Baylor's going to the Sweet 16, and Baylor, of course, is known for its brilliant coach and also for their coach's faith and how faith has a role in the basketball arena. And we're going to hear from the coach on that. Eli Lake's going to stop by. Raymond Arroyo, we hope, is going to stop by and talk to us about this, going back to the newlywed game, going back to the dating game, thinking about these old iconic 60s and 70s television shows. And looking back on it, at the time they all look so innocent now, and the dating game was hilarious. I've got to say, it was hilarious. And they tried to do iterations of it. You know, they did some remakes of the dating game decades later, and they were all lame. But the one that was hosted by Jim Lang, again, that Chuck Barris actually produced and created, it was the first of its kind in television. And you had a woman or a man who was basically interviewing 3 men or women. That was before the big push for LGBTQ. So it was a woman interviewing 3 men or a man interviewing 3 women. Today it would be very different. But they were just asking a series of questions and listening to we couldn't see what they look like. So it was kind of like the early version of The Voice for dating, though, where you can't see what the people look like. And a lot of famous people ended up doing it. Farrah Fawcett was a contestant on the dating game. Other people who ended up becoming big stars. But did you guys watch it? And did you I was little when I watched the Newlywed Game, and it was a little racy back then. I mean, when they used things like when we make Whoopi, that was like a big deal back then to say that. And a lot of people looking back on it say that was the beginning of the sexualization of, entertainment, and especially television entertainment. And that might be a little overstated, but they were really fun shows. But they got a little racy at the time. And I remember watching them going, well, what does that mean? You're listening to your Healthy Radio Addiction. 855-40-LAURA. Memory Lane, walking down Memory Lane with Chuck Barris as the Gong Show continues on Capitol Hill. The Gorsuch hearings and the health care reform debate. Jim Jordan's going to stop by. We have a lot more to get to. And new news from Rockville High School in Maryland, where parents continue to be outraged about the rape of a 14-year-old girl at the hands of at least one illegal immigrant. I think it's two illegal immigrants, one from El Salvador, one from Guatemala, one who was detained at the border and released. In other words, he was a dreamer until he turned one young woman's life into a nightmare. 855-40-LAURA. That's where it should have started, right? Somebody said, it's Neil Gorsuch said, we shouldn't criticize the judges. So why? Why can't politicians criticize judges? I don't understand that. Politicians cannot criticize judges. I think that is preposterous. Judges strike down laws, implicit criticism of the way the legislature works. Judges strike down executive actions, implicit criticism of the way the executive branch works. So the executive branch and Congress should be deaf, dumb, and blind when it comes to judicial overreach. You know, I think the point about like personal insults, that's fine. I think he's right about that if that's what he's referring to, Gorsuch. But this idea that judges are sacrosanct and they can't ever be criticized, Donald Trump is absolutely right about that. The decisions in the Ninth Circuit, in Hawaii and in Washington State were travesties, citing cable news comments as legal findings and legal justification. It's a total and complete embarrassment. And he's absolutely right. 855-40-LAURA. Let's go to Kim in Michigan, line 5. We got a lot of calls on the board. I'll tell you something. This Neil Gorsuch better turn out to be a good justice because we got a lot of people trotting him around saying, oh, he's the best thing since sliced bread. I talked about this on the special report panel last night. He better turn out to be great. Better turn out to be a phenomenal judge because we've heard a lot about how great he is, and he better be. Because there were other judges they could have gone with who we knew were phenomenal. And I'm hoping for the absolute best from Neil Gorsuch. I think he did a really good job for the most part yesterday. But there better not be evolving in the in the Supreme Court building going on with them. We've seen enough evolving from John Roberts and people like David Hackett Souter and Anthony Kennedy. Let's go to Kim. Go ahead, Kim.
Well, thank you so much for your program. I ask people to listen to the Laura Ingraham program, and God bless you for telling the truth. And I just have two quick questions. How can people believe in mercy when they don't live by the law and they're trying to make exceptions for illegal aliens who they're violating everybody's constitutional rights?
Right. Well, that's a great point. I mean, I think that we've seen these horrific crimes being committed all across the United States. Donald Trump was castigated for raising the issue of criminality and illegal immigration when he announced his run for the presidency. How many days and weeks and months did they go after him for that comment about rape? Turns out, you think he's closer to the truth than these other people covering up for the illegal aliens? Congressman Jim Jordan in the Freedom Caucus's opposition to what's called the repeal of Obamacare. Don't go away. I don't see how they put Humpty Dumpty back together again now. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. We'll see. The vote's tomorrow. Joining us now. He's not joining us now. Okay, so I only find this out as the show is going on. So I have no idea that Congressman Jordan's not on. In just a few moments, we're going to be joined by Congressman Jim Jordan from Ohio. He is one of the holdouts on this, on this health care deal. And I think so far, conservative House Republicans are standing up to what President Trump threatened. And he says, you guys are going to lose your seat. They believe that if Republicans sign on to this faux repeal bill, it's not a real repeal bill. If they sign on to it, they think it's a sure thing that they'll lose their seat because it's not really repealed and it won't bring down prices. Rand Paul was all over television yesterday saying, guys, this is not a repeal of Obamacare. If it's a repeal, I'll support it. Ditto for Mike Lee, who has been fantastic on this. Lee has been a leader for the conservative movement, and he's absolutely right.
I think we have 30 to 35 no votes in the House, and I think either the House leadership will put it forward and lose, or they will begin counting the votes very closely and decide not to put it forward. I think at that point, conservatives will have earned a seat at the table, and then the real negotiations begin. What I think has gone on so far are the pre-negotiations, but the real negotiations begin when we show them that they don't have a vote to pass their Obamacare light bill.
You said today.
He's right. And Rand Paul knows that if they do this wrong, then they will really pay. And more importantly, the country will pay. I think people like Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan, I think they're willing to, they're willing to go down. They're willing to actually die on this hill. And I think Donald Trump probably didn't help himself when he got down the tweeting road a couple of weeks ago and wasted the last 2 weeks on the did Obama personally order a wiretap or not story. And that just, I think, caused a lot of distraction. And unfortunately, that distraction did not do anything to help the health care bill. Conservatives say they have the votes to block the bill. Do you think Paul Ryan will actually put this vote to the floor? If they don't have the votes, they're not going to call the vote. Jim Jordan from Ohio, Congressman, Freedom Caucus member, joins us now, Ohio's 4th District. Congressman, great to have you with us. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Great to be with you, Laura.
So the president came to Capitol Hill yesterday.
Yep.
In your estimation, how many minds were changed in that room from a no vote to a yes vote after the Trump visit?
Well, I mean, who knows? But what I do know is that there aren't enough votes to pass this thing because it's just not a bill that repeals Obamacare. It's not a bill that lowers premiums. It's not a bill that unites Republicans. Every major conservative organization in the country is opposed to this thing, and a bunch of conservatives in the House, and maybe just as important or as important, a bunch of conservatives in the Senate. So this bill doesn't lower premiums and doesn't do what we told the American people we're going to do. The president did a nice job, like he always does, but that doesn't change the document. That doesn't change the legislation and what's in the four corners of the actual document. So we're opposed to it, and there aren't the votes to pass it right now. That's for darn sure.
Well, if the concern is, and one of my sources, one of your colleagues told me yesterday, the concern is that the mandates are still in the legislation, that the type of coverage that has to be in various plans, that's still in, and the under 26 is still in. All of these mandates still exist. So Paul Ryan comes back and says, well, we get all that, but this is what the president campaigned on. And yesterday at his press conference, Paul Ryan got up and said, you know what this is about? It's about the signs that were at the president's rally last night. Promises made, promises kept. So in other words, he's saying people like you are keeping the president from fulfilling his promises. That's what he said yesterday.
Laura, what did we promise the American people? We promised them we'd repeal it. What did we vote on 15 months ago? Clean repeal. We were all for it then. We put it on President Obama's desk. But now that it counts, we can't do clean repeal. We can't actually bring down premium costs like we told the American people. I mean, this idea that, we should do what we said. And what we said is we would repeal Obamacare and replace it with something that brings down premiums. This legislation doesn't do it. Even Krauthammer said it's Obamacare light. When it comes to bringing down premiums, even the CBO said premiums are going to go up. When it comes to uniting Republicans, every major conservative organization is against it. And this other key question is, will Phase 2 and Phase 3 happen? No. We know that the regulations of doctor price is going to change, are going to get challenged in court. That's the way the left operates. We know that's going to happen. So that's going to be tied up in court. And Phase 3, if Phase 3 can happen, let's do it today. Let's pass those things today. And put those key provisions in law that will help with middle-class families having lower premiums and better health care. But we're not doing that. So that's the problem with this thing. And all we're trying to do as conservatives say, we want to help President Trump get to what we all told the American people we were going to do when they sent us here to do it.
Last night on Special Report, Charles Krauthammer said, why don't the House Republicans pass the best bill they can pass and then deal with all these other issues during conference when the Senate and the House comes back together? Tell my audience why that would not be the right path.
99 times out of 100, what we send to the Senate doesn't get better. right?
Doesn't get better.
Come on.
It gets worse.
Yeah, it doesn't get better. I mean, that's just the nature of that body over there. And frankly, why not put it in on the front end? Our job is to do what we said. Our job is not to say, oh, we're going to do something here that's not consistent with what we told the voters and hope and pray that the Senate will do something that they typically don't do. That's not how it's supposed to work. And think about this. We got this bill 3 weeks ago. Not one single witness testified in committee. Not one single amendment was allowed to be offered in the Ways and Means Committee, the Oversight Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, or the Budget Committee. And now the only amendment coming from a technical amendment coming from the leadership. That's how the legislative process is supposed to work. And this is some binary choice if we're supposed to take it or leave it. I just do not see how that is in any way consistent with what we told the American people in 2010, 2014, and November 8, 2016. That is not consistent with what we told them. And that's what we're fighting for.
Another thing that was slightly confusing to me, and maybe you can clear it up, which was also said last night on Special Report, is that the bill that you all passed in 2015, I think Mara Liasson said this, was also not a completely clean repeal. To what was she referring?
It was a clean repeal, but there were a few regulations that, based on this complicated reconciliation process, that the Senate felt we couldn't include. Now, I think we could, and I think we should put those in there, but they weren't there. But what we said is, at a minimum, let's do what we all voted on 15 months ago. We were all able to pass that then. Why not do that now? Instead, they've said, no, we're not going to do even that much, and we're going to add in some extra stuff that basically keeps Obamacare in place, like taking the Medicaid expansion and extending it for several years out into the future, taking instead of subsidies, we're going to call it a different name, refundable tax credits for people who may not even have a tax liability. And we're going to say, instead of this mandate, we're going to put in this 30% surcharge, this 30% penalty. So they keep the same basic structure. That was not in our 2015 bill. But I would be more than happy to take that 2015 bill and add in those few regulations that weren't included in that reconciliation bill we sent there 15 months ago. I'm fine doing that now if we want to push it. And I think we should, because that's what we told the American people.
So, again, my listeners understand this. The White House seems to, at least this is what my reporting tells me, they seem to have given an inordinate amount of authority and running room to Paul Ryan on the health care issue. And for to a large extent, they were hands off on how the actual repeal bill and the follow-on pieces should be crafted. Is that correct?
I mean, this is the bill developed by House leadership, plain and simple. And frankly, I think we're at a point where the appropriate strategy is to say, start over. I said this morning on a different program. I said, look, sometimes you learn more from losses than you learn from the wins, and you learn how to change things, do things better, and do things in a way that's going to achieve success. I think we're at that point. Let's just start over and do it right.
And how many of your colleagues in the House have that same view? Even if they're against the bill, are they where you are on start over?
I think that number is probably growing. I really do. Now we'll see, and we still got time to negotiate and substantively change this thing. But I think it may be the best. I mean, my background's wrestling, and like I said, sometimes you learn more when you lose than you learn from the wins. And maybe this is one of those times where we got to just say, you know what? Let's redo this. Let's do it right. And let's get together and let's make sure we're doing what we told the American people we were going to do.
Congressman, one issue has been raised about the president's credibility coming off of this Russian wiretap tweet from a few weeks ago, that his mojo when he went to Capitol Hill was perhaps diminished because of all these other tangential issues that are swirling about. Is there any truth to that understanding?
No, I don't think so at all. And I mean, I got to, this, Laura, the president, when he is in front of a group, does a great job. And I thought he handled himself very well yesterday. I'll be honest, he got us laughing. It was, he talked about a number of different things. So the president and the White House, frankly, have been very, we've met with, I don't know how many times I've talked to Mulvaney and Vice President Pence and Secretary Price. And we've met with the president. So they've been fine, and I thought he did a great job yesterday. But that doesn't change the fact.
But is he getting the right advice? This is my question to you. Is he getting the right advice about pursuing this current version of a so-called repeal?
Here's what we've told him. No, we've told him this. Several of us members of the Freedom Caucus. Mr. President, no one wants you to succeed more. Last fall during that campaign, it was Freedom Caucus guys who were busting their tail. Look, I was helping him in Ohio when our governor wasn't. Mark Meadows was helping him all across the state of North Carolina more than anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So we want you to succeed. We want America to prosper. We want to keep our commitments and promises to the American people. We genuinely believe this bill doesn't do it, and that's why we're opposed to it. And that's why we're working to make changes to this bill that will accomplish what we all campaigned on last year.
Well, we're talking to Congressman Jim Jordan. Congressman, on the issue of implicit or explicit threats, did you feel at any point in time over the last few weeks that any member of the White House staff, including the president himself, was threatening any of the Freedom Caucus members with primary challenges or other political retribution?
I mean, to be honest, Laura, I don't even worry about that. I didn't feel that, and don't worry about it. That's my commitment is to the families in the 4th District of Ohio, and what I told them, our commitment is to doing what we said we would do, accomplishing what they sent us here to accomplish, plain and simple. My attitude is you do what you said, you do the right policy, it typically turns out to be good politics. And so let's focus on doing the right thing and doing what we said. That's all our focus is. Leave the politics and all that stuff to other people. I don't worry about it, frankly, and I've been in tough matches before and tough primaries before. It's not what I worry about. What I worry about is doing what the people in the 4th District sent me here to do.
Well, I got your back on this. I'm completely with you. Mark Meadows, the rest of the Freedom Caucus, Rand Paul, Mike Lee,
thank you.
Tom Cotton. You guys are doing what the voters in your districts and in these key Rust Belt states across this country wanted. They wanted the establishment to be given a wake-up call, and now the establishment wrote this repeal, and a lot of people are really unhappy because they know it's not going to bring down the cost of health care insurance, and that's the bottom line. People are smart. They see through this. Congressman, stay in touch with us. So we'll be watching very carefully tomorrow, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
All right. We'll take a break on the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. We'll go rapid fire when we come back. Well, I think that's a stretch. It's not the same, but it's not going to do what we need, which is to bring down the cost of health care. Josh in Nebraska, line 2. Josh.
The two players that come together when you're putting healthcare costs together are hospitals and physicians on one side and insurance companies on the other. Both parties have an interest in keeping the prices high. Insurance companies need the prices high because you don't need insurance for stuff that's cheap. And
exactly.
Of course, physicians and hospitals have the profit motive.
Who has the motivation? Right, you're absolutely right, Josh. Who has the motivation to keep the status quo in place? High cost of insurance, high cost of health care. Who benefits? Not the consumers of health care, not the patients. Great point. 855-40-LAURA. A lot more to get to. Don't go away. Newlywed Game, the dating game, the Gong Show, what his contribution to television was in music. He was kind of a wacky Renaissance man. We're going to get into that later on, but our office here at the Laura Ingraham Show and LifeZette offices, which are right through the glass, are obsessed with the NCAA basketball tournament, and they begged me to fill out my bracket. And, of course, I don't have time, so I didn't. But I'm fascinated by the story that the kids at LifeZette wrote about the Baylor coach who you just heard, Scott Drew, who brings not only athletic expertise to the game of basketball, but brings his faith and his belief in Jesus Christ to his players at this high-pressure, high-stakes environment. And I'm delighted that Coach Scott Drew is with us now. Scott, how are you? Good to talk to you.
Hey, I am doing great. And I know one thing, you are smarter than all of us because you wait till the tournament's over and then you fill out your bracket.
Yeah.
And you don't miss any games. So that's really the way to do it.
Yeah, I picked Gonzaga and West Virginia and Xavier. And, well, Coach, I have to say, I'm from Connecticut originally. So the first question I had to Jay, who's our expert in our studio, is, why the heck didn't UConn make it this year? Because UConn's usually such a good team, and they didn't even make the tournament. So then after that, it was then UVA, where I went to law school. They're out. Dartmouth, of course, never makes it, and that's where I went to college. So I just marvel at all you guys who can actually play the game.
Well, thank goodness you didn't come to Baylor because we're still in it. But those are excellent schools and have great coaches. Tony Bennett's a great friend of mine at Virginia.
Oh, fantastic. Well, let's talk about the game. Everybody is waiting for the big game at Madison Square Garden in New York Friday night against South Carolina. You guys are ranked third. South Carolina is ranked seventh. What should we expect?
Well, like whatever game is in March, it doesn't matter where you're seated, where you're ranked, who's predicted to win. What makes March so exciting is it's 40 minutes, and who's the best for that 40 minutes is the team that wins. And it's not always the best team because the parity in college basketball is not 4 or 7. It's one game. So everybody loves seeing upsets. You see a lot of them in March, and with college athletes, 18 to 22-year-olds, you never really know what you're going to get. So it's must-watch TV.
Now, it's something to behold, even for people who aren't college basketball fans. I think this time of year is just always special. It's always fun. And I found myself the other night watching the Michigan game, and I was thinking, Michigan Duke, who's going to win? And I never watch. I've got to say, I've confessed, I'm a football person. I don't watch a lot of basketball. But I started watching that game, and I'm like, oh, my God, I watched it to the very end. And you get sucked in. And, again, even for the non-crazed fans, there's something about this tournament that just brings everybody in. It brings the country together, which I think is great. We need more events like this.
Well, that's the beauty of sports. It transcends everything, and doesn't matter race, wealth, beliefs. It's just when you cross those lines, you're on a team, and you're playing as a team, and that's the beauty of sports.
Do you think at this point, with talent like Jonathan Motley, 6'10", he's a junior? Is that right? He's a junior forward?
He's a junior, correct.
Manu Lecomte, who's a 5'11" guard, who's fast as lightning, and also is great at stealing, which I love. That's what I was. I played high school basketball, and I was the key stealer. I'd love to steal passes. That was like the little fox who would come up behind people. They'd be dribbling down.
You're athletic. That's great.
Yeah, so I would steal it from behind. But Manu is unbelievably fast. I love it when the shorter guys are among the best players.
Well, the short guys got to be fast. If not, it's hard to play basketball because those 6'10" guys, they're pretty athletic and tough to score against.
How did you become a basketball coach? You didn't play in college, or did you? I don't think you played in college.
No, I did not in college. My whole family, my dad was the 7th all-time winningest active coach, and my brother was the 16th pick in the NBA draft, and I was blessed to coach him with my dad at Valparaiso University, and my sister actually had her jersey retired and was Gatorade Player of the state of Indiana.
My God.
My brother was Mr. Basketball in Indiana, and I played until God didn't bless me with much height. I was 5'1.5" my sophomore year, and I knew at that point he wanted me to coach instead of play, so I was a late bloomer. But the great thing was God gives us all different talents and abilities, and my desire has always been to help other people reach their goals and dreams, and I've coached my brothers and sisters' teams when they were younger, and then worked with my dad, and that was a blessing, and then took over at Valparaiso University, and then came down to Baylor, and we've been here for 14 years. And
unbelievable.
Had a lot of success, had a lot of great players, and because of that, been able to, in the last 10 years, we've been ranked in the top 25 and been able to do a lot of things that a lot of schools aren't able to. And so that especially at a school like Baylor University, it's the largest Baptist school in the nation. It's a great platform, and us and the women are still alive. One of 4 teams to have the men and women's basketball teams in the Sweet 16 for both events. So that's awesome.
We're talking to Coach Scott Drew of Baylor University. The Sweet 16, they'll be playing South Carolina on Friday night in New York at Madison Square Garden. Coach, you came into this program at Baylor in 2003 on the heels of what was a horrific series of events for the team. We had one teammate murder another. Morale was low. People were wondering, where had this program gone wrong? How did you turn the situation from tragedy and criminality to eventually inspiration and motivation?
Well, as you know, when you first get to a new job, there's so much to do that you really don't have time to look in the past. And at Baylor University, there's so many good people and so many positives. And one event doesn't define a university, a state, a school, or anything. And we all make mistakes. We all try to get better at what we do daily. But we've really been blessed to bring in players that have represented the school the right way. They've had the right character that this school can be proud of. And do kids make mistakes? Yes. Do we sin? Yes. But in a large part, because of the sacrifice of the guys that we brought in, they've been team-oriented guys that want to make this university proud. We've been able to, since 2010 now, this will be 2 Elite Eights, 2 Sweet 16s. Hopefully this one keeps going. And then an NIT championship and a runner-up. So a lot of success.
Tell us about the role of faith in the daily life of we're talking about players now, but obviously this is just who you are and the man you are, your belief in Jesus Christ, your personal Savior, and how you take that feeling and message to your players through, again, high-pressure, high-stakes games with, for them, at age 18 to 22, it's the biggest thing they'll ever do, many of them, in their entire life. And how do you keep them grounded, and how do you keep their eye on the real prize?
Well, to start with, we all know actions speak louder than words, so it's really important for us, our coaches, to be godly role models for them. And from that, hopefully, being at a Christian school, we're able to start practice with a prayer, end practice with a prayer. We're able to have a no cussing policy at practice. So we're able to do some things like that. And at the same time, we have 2 chaplains on the team, and they do voluntary Bible studies with the guys. Those are tremendous, and they're able to grow there. We have game day chapel services that our guys attend, and from that we've had one year we had 6 players baptized. This year we've had 1, and probably once season's over we'll have another. So a lot of young men have come to know Christ at Baylor University, and as we know, if we live a blessed life, you're looking at 80 years. So winning a basketball game is one thing, winning the real prize and getting to heaven, that's the most important thing. So that's something that we don't take lightly working here at Baylor University.
I think that for college athletes, I played some field hockey and softball in college, and you're looking back on it, especially if you go to college or university without a really strong faith grounding, you're really at a disadvantage in my view. I didn't have a particularly strong faith when I went off to college. I made a lot of mistakes, and to have a role model it is a father figure model. There's no doubt about it. And I've talked to pro football players, pro basketball players about this. To have that individual at the helm of a team and an enterprise, and chaplains, as you said, is so critical for those young men and in other sports, young women who didn't have that grounding at home. And you find it. I mean, you really find it. If you have your ears open, you and your eyes open, you can find it, and it changes your whole life.
Well, and that's where, as we know, the first time you're on your own and you're away from home, I really agree with you as far as the support in your life, as far as the coaches and mentors and the adults. But I think it's even more important that you have a good culture with the team, because at 12 o'clock at night, at 1 o'clock at night, they're not with us. We're home with our families and hopefully sleeping if we're lucky. But they're with their other teammates, and that's why with us, our culture is so important, and we want to bring in kids that want to do the right thing, because if your 2 roommates are studying, or if your 2 roommates are in the gym working out, you're probably there. If your 2 roommates are doing the wrong thing or out all night, then you're probably out all night. night. So our culture is really important to us, and that's why not everybody we recruit, but people that we think are really goal-oriented and driven and want to become the best person and a basketball player they can be, and we're able to help them academically, socially, spiritually, along with basketball. But that's where that culture is so important, because again, they're not with us at night. So we've been blessed to have a lot of good leaders and a lot of good players that have been great role models for the freshmen when they're away from home for the first time.
How about I always wondered about this. In basketball, college basketball, you can leave after your freshman year, and forgive me if I think this is right, but you've had some freshmen leave, but not as many as other teams. I mean, people like Pierre Jackson, who else? Taurine Waller-Prince.
Yeah.
I mean, how long? Go ahead.
How long were they in school? We've had some players that have stayed 4 years, some players that have stayed 5 years and been drafted. So we've had a lot of people that have stayed the whole time. I think it's our last 36 out of 38 seniors have all graduated, and we've had the most players since 2010 that weren't 5-star recruits or weren't McDonald's All-Americans make it to the NBA. We've had 4 of them. But we've also had Quincy Miller, who was a one-and-done, Perry Jones, who was here 2 years and out, Isaiah Austin. And with that, the NBA, the first-round contracts are guaranteed. So you're looking at guaranteed money, where the second-round contracts aren't guaranteed. So if players after a year or 2 years can get guaranteed money and their parents or family want them to go to the NBA, then that's their choice. Our goal is that they make educated decisions based on real information, and the NBA allows us to get feedback from their advisory board, just so you wouldn't want someone to leave college and find out they're not drafted because some agent told them they were going to be a lottery pick, and now they have no place to play.
Well, Corey Jefferson came in. When did Corey Jefferson? Was it 2015? Class? Did he come in 2015?
And he was a redshirt. His military family, and his mom still comes to the games from Killeen. But he was somebody that stayed 5 years and then was able to get to the NBA. So we've had a mixture of that. But at the end of the day, hopefully they're growing spiritually, socially, academically along with basketball, because it's one thing to be a talented player, but if you don't have the other stuff, then you're not going to make it.
How do you guard a player like Sindarius Thornwell from South Carolina? How are you telling your
I was going to ask you that. Maybe put you on him, because you're good at coming from behind and getting steals.
They wouldn't see me coming. I'd come right from behind. They think they're doing that cool through the legs dribble, but
through the legs behind the back stuff.
Yeah. They wouldn't even hear me come from behind.
He's the SEC Player of the Year, so not many people have been able to stop him. In conference, he averaged 22 points a game. So with great players, you're never going to stop them. You just try to make things difficult on them, and hopefully they don't go off for 44 points like he did against Alabama.
Scott, you're an amazing man, and for someone who didn't play a lot of college basketball or pro basketball, you know so much about basketball. It's really impressive. And it's because, I think, of your upbringing, your father, everything you learned from him, your brother and sister, Baylor coach Scott Drew. We wish you the best of luck. We're going to be watching Friday night. We're very excited. And more than that, we just hope you check back in with us. And I'm really happy what you do for your players day in and day out. I know how much they love you, and it's a great, great story.
Well, thank you very much. And since your teams are out, you can cheer for Baylor, all right?
I got it. Baylor's my team for Friday night.
All right.
No
thank
big
you very
deal.
much.
All right,
Thanks
you take care.
You
all right, Coach, stay with us. I have an idea. Why don't we continue the wall right up the coast, the West Coast? And, just wall off California from the rest of the country. So we'll go Nevada, go Colorado, Utah, all the way to Idaho. Wall the whole thing off. California can exist on its own. Honestly, this California is just become another country. And Malibu is declaring itself a sanctuary community. It's 96% white. In solidarity with their gardeners and nannies and housekeepers, and they're just total frauds. of course, a few days ago on Capitol Hill. In just a moment, we're going to be joined by Eli Lake, who's a writer, investigative reporter at Bloomberg, terrific writer on national security matters. Before we get to him, Joe Biden is speaking on Capitol Hill about Obamacare and the attempt to repeal it. Let's listen in. Let's listen. All right. Well, Joe Biden is speaking. We'll go back to that in just a moment. He's speaking on MSNBC. They're cutting in and out. Yeah, it's coming. Well, he was just on, but they just cut out of it. It's on C-SPAN, I believe. So we have a new breaking story that has developed during our show from the Associated Press. Manafort had planned to benefit Putin government. President Donald Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, secretly worked for a Russian billionaire to advance the interests of Russian President Vladimir Putin a decade ago and proposed an ambitious political strategy to undermine anti-Russian opposition across former Soviet republics. The work appears to contradict assertions by the Trump administration and Manafort himself that he never worked for Russian interests. Manafort proposed in a confidential strategy plan in June 2005 that he would influence politics, business dealings, and news coverage inside the United States, Europe, and the former Soviet republics to benefit the Putin government, even as U.S.-Russia relations under George W. Bush grew worse. Manafort pitched the plans to Russian aluminum magnate Oleg Deripaska, a close Putin ally with whom Manafort eventually signed a $10 million annual contract beginning in 2006. Manafort and Deripaska maintained a business relationship until at least 2009, according to one person familiar with the work. Manafort's plans were laid out in documents obtained by the AP that included strategy memoranda and records showing international wire transfers of millions of dollars. Well, this is certainly going to get the left going, even though it was a decade ago. Does this contradict what Manafort has said, both in written statements and other comments in the press? Joining us now is the aforementioned Eli Lake. Eli, first of all, it's great to talk to you. We have to ask you about this Manafort story. You wrote about Paul Manafort back in April of 2016. The title of your piece, Trump Just Hired His Next Scandal.
Yes. Thank you very much for having me on the show. I love the show. I think Manafort has always been really bad news, and he brought enormous amounts of baggage, not just the stuff with Oleg Deripaska, which was sort of we knew that he had a relationship with him, but all kinds of shady oligarch types, and it was an odd choice in that regard as to why I thought at the time that Trump brought him in. But it should be said that it was a short tenure for Paul Manafort. As you remember, we were all living, we were all watching all this, and he was, I think, basically let go, over the summer. I think it was either late July or in August, when it became untenable because his name had showed up in what appeared to be sort of a list of people to pay off among the former effects of Viktor Yanukovych, who was the Ukrainian president who he helped elect way back when, I think in 2011. And so now Manafort is facing a lot of issues. I don't know what that necessarily has to do with Trump's current inner circle or Trump's own connections to Russian figures or anything like that. And you could look beyond Russia with Manafort. Manafort's had a lot of clients who are pretty kind of high up on the sleaze meter, if you will.
Well, let me just say, as do many of these political consultants and lobbyists from the left and the right. We have folks like James Carville, John Podesta, others representing foreign interests, foreign candidates, foreign governments all over the world. And this is how they make big, big, big money.
That's correct. I would just point out, though, in Manafort's case, I think he was double-dipping at times. He sort of has a reputation of being, at times, more than just a lobbyist. He did enter into real estate ventures with Dmitry Firtash, who was also the sort of billionaire who helped fund the Yanukovych campaign. And then, at the end of the 1980s, he got in a bit of trouble because he was lobbying for people for HUD contracts. Nothing wrong with housing and urban development contracts that help blighted communities and so forth, but then he was investing in some of the areas that would get those contracts. So he's always been kind of playing on the on the line there. And he, I think, also has this independent problem, which is that he was representing a think tank which was basically an arm of the old Ukrainian government, known as the Center for like East-West Understanding or some sort of innocuous thing. And he did not register as a foreign agent for that, and that's going to deal with him as well as, I think, potentially people in the Podesta group who also took that client. So, you know, he's got a lot of issues. We'll see how much it kind of relates to Trump.
Yeah, his comment after the AP piece came out was actually included in the NBC piece that followed on. He said, "My work for Mr. Deripaska did not involve representing Russian political interests." He added that his work was on business and personal matters in countries where Mr. Deripaska had investments. So that was what Paul Manafort said.
I just want to point out one thing about the story.
Mm-hmm.
We are now dealing with substantive allegations that should be troubling to everyone, as opposed to Jeff Sessions may have had a meeting with the Russian ambassador, which would have been totally normal, or Mike Flynn had a phone conversation, you know, less than a month before he became national security advisor with the Russian ambassador and didn't remember every detail of the conversation. That, to me, is faux scandal. It's fake stuff that is not really anything other than, you know, just sort of feeding a bunch of innuendo. This is pretty substantive. If he was working on behalf in some way of trying to burnish the Kremlin's image in the United States and did not register as a foreign agent in that respect, that's a serious issue.
Right, but what does that have to do with Trump, other than Trump having bad judgment and having hired him?
That's absolutely right. He had the bad judgment, in my view, to hire him. He was then fired. It was a pretty the campaign moved pretty quickly through a lot of people, you know, through its chiefs and so forth, until it finally settled on the troika of, I guess, Bannon and Kellyanne. I mean, you know all the sort of inner details better. But I'm just saying this is a substantive issue that deals with Manafort. It is, I think, in a different category of how many times did you meet the Russian ambassador at the Republican convention, which I always thought was sort of a non-story.
The thing that keeps popping up in my mind during this conversation about the former Soviet Union is that it was really Hillary and President Obama who boosted the fortunes, the standing, the influence of Vladimir Putin, not Donald Trump. Over the 8 years of the Obama presidency, we pulled out our missile defense from Eastern Europe. We attempted a Russian reset, which failed spectacularly. We attempted to re-engage as late as 2015 with John Kerry going over to Moscow with Putin. Time and again, then we saw, of course, uranium interests in the United States being purchased by a Russian company. And all this kept happening during the Obama administration. Then suddenly the left is like, what are we going to do about Russia and Trump? Well, I mean, again, Paul Manafort working for the Russians in 2005, 2006, if he was not forthcoming about that, then he should be held accountable. But unless Donald Trump was somehow in business with Paul Manafort in 2005 to 2009, which I haven't seen any evidence that they were even friendly or knew each other, I don't quite understand, other than having made perhaps the wrong decision in hiring Manafort, what this has to do with Donald Trump.
Look, I think I agree with 90% of that. I just would say this, that it was, I think, we can look back and we can say it was a mistake when George W. Bush looked into Putin's eyes and found the soul of somebody you could do business with, or whatever the phrase he used.
Had him to Crawford, had him to the ranch.
Yeah, had him to the ranch. Okay. But Putin had not really done as many odious and horrible things when that conversation took place. Fast forward, when Obama starts his reset, Russia is occupying, a lot of the country of Georgia. They had just invaded Georgia. Right. And the result of the reset was that the Russians paid no cost for flagrant aggression that needed to be deterred. And so that was just off the bat. They were willing to look the other way pretty much on that. And that, I think, this is the classic problem of the broken windows theory. They're defining deviancy down. And this emboldened Russia. And then we saw throughout the Obama presidency, just look at how Ambassador Michael McFaul, who was an architect of a lot of these policies, was treated when he was the ambassador. It was a form of political and psychological warfare that they did against the U.S. ambassador in Moscow. We should have never stood for that, and we did nothing to really counter it. But eventually, all of our kind of, efforts to reset and look the other way ended up with, Putin feeling emboldened enough to annex Crimea and invade Ukraine through these little green men. And then the policy really finally did begin to change, at least with respect to Ukraine. But it never changed in the Middle East, because right in the same period when we're worried about the Iran deal, the Russians come in and basically establish an air presence in Syria, re-entering the Middle East for the first time since the 1970s, since the Nixon administration. And this is, seen as, well, there's nothing we can really do about it, except for try to continually talk to the Russians, get them to do something we know they're not going to do. So I agree with you that there was a lot of problems with the Democrat policy, but by the time the end of the Obama presidency comes around, you did have a rift, I think, between what Hillary and her camp wanted to do and also other Democrats wanted to do, and the Obama administration, which really wasn't doing anything about Russia except in the context of Ukraine.
Eli, let's talk about the Comey testimony briefly. The left really seized on his comment that we bumped in with, that we've seen no evidence of wiretapping of Trump Tower. But is it as simple as that, given the fact that we now know that the FBI under Obama was investigating the opposition party during a heated campaign season, and again we learn had not, as is customary, informed Congress about it? For whatever reason, decided not to inform the intel leaders and the relevant congressional committees until a couple of days ago. They didn't know about this.
Well, I just published a column saying that now I think Comey is the most powerful person in Washington because he determines the legitimacy of the Trump presidency. I am deeply uncomfortable with that. And by the way, everyone should be deeply uncomfortable with that. And it's not against James Comey. We don't like it when the FBI director is that powerful. The last time we remember that is J. Edgar Hoover, when he was able to, at times, we think, maybe blackmail sitting presidents. I mean, I'm not saying that Comey can do that, but he has found himself in this position where he's far more powerful than we would like him to be. And it raises this question, why would you share the detail and confirm that there was an ongoing counterintelligence investigation, which is going to hang over the Trump presidency and affect everything, I think, and then not say whether there was going to be an investigation into the really serious civil liberties issue of leaking monitored conversations of Mike Flynn or unmasking the names of people caught up in incidental collection? Why would you give one detail and not another detail? And then, I think, by the way, Democrats can ask the same question. Why would you share this, tidbit about Hillary's servers towards the end of it saying we might have new information or new emails and not tell us about this other thing? So he's creating a sense where I don't think it's a no-win situation for the FBI, and we don't want to be in it. I don't like the idea that Comey is basically going to be in charge of, he's going to have this cloud hanging over me.
Yeah, the Damocles sword.
It's going to take forever. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It's a Damocles sword. So we ought to be really uncomfortable with that. And on the question of Trump's tweets, listen, he was factually wrong the way he tweeted it. And I don't want to give him, he's the president, he should have known better. But there is a whole set of other issues about, well, okay, did people in the White House request information to unmask the names of Trump officials who were collected? Were there other issues here that we don't know about in terms of tasking reports on people advising Trump or Trump himself and their ties to Russia?
Mm-hmm.
And was there an effort to make sure that was sent out? I don't know the answers to that. I don't want to make these kinds of allegations, without evidence.
Well, where are the lie detector tests? Yeah, I mean, we could do lie detector tests on the 20 people that had access to this information. I have a feeling it didn't come from the intel community. I have a feeling the unmasking and the leaks came right out of the White House. That's my sense. There's someone connected to the White House. If President Obama was briefed on this, then who knows who he told? Ben Rhodes? I'm just throwing out names here. But I think you're right. The more powerful Comey becomes, the more imperiled U.S. democracy becomes. And there has to be a check on Comey at some point. Eli Lake, go ahead quickly. We're almost out of time.
To be continued.
All right. Eli Lake, thank you so much for joining us. Loved your piece. We'll link it up on Facebook and lauraingraham.com. Stay with us.
Yeah, I can't answer that.
The new double standard on leaks in the Trump era and the scrambled politics of the healthcare debate, all on Life Zet.